Welcome to our first session on clinical trial writing. So, over the next 10 sessions, we will explore the essential aspects of drafting various clinical trial documents. So, various as in there are so many clinical trial documents, but we will try to cover most of them, and some of them which are most important, we'll try to cover in detail with examples and we'll write it during the course. Okay. Then we will try to understand the importance of ensuring compliance, and then how to enhance clarity, because it is also a type of research communication, right? So we will understand that. So today we will start with introduction to clinical research and its documentation. First of all, I thought I'll just take you through the basics and then we'll go through the documents also today in brief. So, what is clinical research? Most of you would be aware of it already. So, these are the studies to test new drugs, already approved drugs, devices, or any other form of treatment. Okay. So, many clinical trials try to find new ways to detect, diagnose, or to measure the extent of disease. Some trials even try to find some trials even try to prevent diseases. Researchers need human volunteers to test these drugs or devices or any other form of treatment. Doctors use these clinical trials to learn whether a new drug, treatment, or a new fixed dose combination is safe to use for people. Clinical trials are important, especially in developing new treatment for serious diseases also like cancer. But we have clinical trial for all type of diseases. Okay. Uh, then one second. So basically, we can conclude that from this slide that clinical research is the backbone of medical advancements. It involves carefully designed studies to evaluate new treatments, drugs, intervention, and without a well structured clinical research, we wouldn't have the medicines and therapies that save millions of lives today. So, about the design, the standard, the perfectly designed research, we will speak about various types of clinical trial design, how people come, like how the researchers finalize which design is supposed to be most suitable for this particular clinical research. Okay. So, when I say design, there are different types of designs, like there are different terms used. I will tell you: double blind, single blind, assessor blind. So these are different types of masking. Okay. Then there are parallel study, crossover study, all these things. So we will try to understand these things as and when the topic comes. Okay. Then why do we need clinical trials? So before we learn anything, unless and until we know why do we need it, we won't have any interest in it, right? So clinical trials determines what works and it also finds what doesn't work. So in the field of research, even if you are a college student or if you're a professor or if you're working somewhere in the field of research, it is not just important to find out what works, it is important to find out what doesn't work also. Okay. So when we start a research, we don't know if the outcome is going to be positive or negative, but still researchers are so enthusiastic about the work they do that they love the work they do. So they still go ahead even without knowing the outcome, like whether it is going to support their research, support their hypothesis or no. But even if the results are negative, it helps the future researchers to not repeat the same research, to save their time and to focus on something that is more important, right? So the key questions that a clinical trial answers is: does this new treatment work better than the existing options? So when we conduct a research in human participant, the main thing is not just it working in a particular therapeutic area or particular disease. Like for example, I will give a very simple example: diabetes. Okay. So for diabetes there are so many medications and still new clinical trials keep on happening. So is it like they just do it for the sake of doing it? No. So there would be already existing medicines which would have its own pros and cons, the advantages as well as the risks. Okay. Side effects. So the researchers try to find new drugs which do not have the risks that the existing drugs have. Okay. Another thing that the researchers try in this particular area, I would say, is pill burden. Pill burden is a thing which is a patient may be taking 2 or 3 pills of a single drug, right? And then imagine yourself, you will have, like, if we have to eat 2 3 tablets in a day, we would think that okay, I'll eat only 2 today and I'll skip the third one. There is a possibility, especially when you have to have it for the rest of your life or for a longer duration. Okay, so what these researchers try to make is fixed dose combinations of various drugs. So then the number of pills that a patient has to have in a day reduces, then patient compliance increases and the outcome, that is the improvement in the condition, also increases. So these are the different researches. There would be many more researches that we will be speaking about in the next sessions. Then the other questions that clinical trial answers is it safe, and if the benefits outweighs the risks. Okay, then other questions that clinical trial answers is if if the current treatment that we are evaluating, is it superior to the current standard of care. So by superior we mean statistically significant. Okay, so when we conduct a research, we have a hypothesis, we have statistical section where we say that we are planning to compare, like, our drug, the current test drug or test product. Okay, if it is a combination of multiple drugs, uh, we are planning to compare it with a standard of care or with another drug, okay, or another product. So our aim would be either to prove our product is superior to the already existing standard of care, or it is non inferior, okay, so that it can be used as an alternative. But if the product is inferior to the already existing therapy, then there is no point, right? Then trials are conducted in various phases to ensure safety and effectiveness. This is a very theoretical area which most of you would be aware of, that there are different phases of clinical trial. Phase 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. The goal of clinical trial is to create reliable data with minimal risk to patients. So even though we include human patients, there are a lot of ethical guidelines and a lot of things that we are supposed to follow. It's in the regulations and we cannot misuse or make any mistakes. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. So this is the theoretical thing that I was talking about, phases of clinical trials. So there are different phases of clinical trials. These phases you all would be aware of. What I would like to talk about is, see, when a new drug is made, a researcher makes a new drug. Okay, he researches and discovers a new drug. It does not directly enter into human trial because human lives, we cannot just put it at risk. Okay, so first a lot of research is done. So by research I mean the drug is evaluated for efficacy in cell culture, the drug is evaluated for efficacy in animal studies. So these studies are called preclinical studies. After preclinical studies only it enters into the clinical trial, and to enter into clinical trial also a lot of regulatory approvals are required based on the location where the trial is planned to be conducted. Like for India, we need to take approval from DCGI, CDSCO. Okay. For US, they have to take approval from FDA. For Europe, they have to take approval from EMA. Okay. Now, importance of well written clinical trial documents. So those of you who have attended various medical writing webinars and all, so writing clinical trial document is also a type of medical writing, right? So it is very important. So even if the data is available, the research is done, it was done in a very well manner, or the research is planned, okay, we want to conduct a research on this particular drug which has shown excellent effects during the preclinical studies, and it will be very beneficial, and everything is kind of like the researchers are aware or very positive about the outcome. They think that it will be very safe and effective and we should go ahead with it. But a writer comes into picture to put it in a proper manner, okay, to write the design in a proper manner. So I will give you here one one main example. Okay, how the research is conducted when in clinical trials. So a clinical trial protocol is made. After the clinical trial protocol is made, a lot of approval process and everything is done. Okay, suppose everything is approved, and there is one minor sentence error or which got missed, something, or maybe interpretation issues. Okay, one sentence is interpreted in a certain way by one person and in a different way by another person. Okay, so now this protocol goes to different sites if it is a multi-center study. In multi-center studies there are multiple centers for one same study. So for example, in India the trial is conducted, so multiple centers, like one center is in Mumbai, another is in Chennai, and third center is in Delhi. So like that there would be like suppose 8 10 centers. Okay, so now this protocol is given to them and they have to read, and they are not in connection with each other. Okay, all these sites are independent of each other. The only connecting point is the medical writer, the medical team, and the clinic, the sponsor team. Okay, so everyone will read and interpret it in a different way. During the conduct of the study, they may all do something different, which is not allowed. Okay, which is a major error, major protocol deviation. So then later it will create issues. That is what the importance of medical writer is. So when you write, you have to ensure that it is clear. There is only one meaning to each statement. It does not have multiple interpretations. If 10 people read it, all 10 people should understand it in the same way. They should interpret it and perform it in the same way. Okay, because a lot of human lives are involved in it. You cannot afford to make a single mistake. So that is why regulatory writing is so important, and you need to have a lot of experience to enter into it, and it is difficult for a fresher to get into it. That's what a lot of people experience. Okay, so that is the importance of well written clinical trial documents. Ensures regulatory compliance and approval, facilitates clear communication among stakeholders, then improves data clarity and accuracy, protects patient safety and rights. Okay, so your patient safety and rights. So what role does a patient have when it is about protocol and study report? One is safety. As I said, that if there is some slight deviation in the conduct of the study, then it will be a big issue and it will affect the patient directly. It's about his health, patient's health, his or her health. Okay, so patient safety and right. Another thing is there are documents which are made for patients. Okay, that is called informed consent documents, ICD, and patient diaries. These are made for patients. So ICDs are basically documents in which the entire research plan would be written in a very simple language. Okay, anybody who knows English, if the ICD is in English language and a person knows English, that person, regardless of whether the person is from science background or not, will be able to understand it easily. The side effect of the study, all the details, all the possible details that a patient needs to know will be mentioned in that. Okay, similarly, patient diary is a document which will be given during the study to the patient, and it will have a lot of uh, data to be filled in by the patient. For example, adverse events. So the patient experiences some headache after starting the treatment. So the diary will be given, which will be having section to fill the date and everything. And anything that the patient feels during the study, during the after signing of the informed consent form, during the entire study duration, the patient will have to write it down in the diary if the diary is given to the patient. Okay, so that will be considered as adverse event, and the investigator at the site will decide whether this adverse event is related to the study treatment or not. Okay, because sometime it may happen, like like right now I'm not a participant of clinical trial, any clinical trial, but if I have headache, so it is normal. So even if I participate and that time I have headache, okay, so it may or may not be related to the drug, right? So that the investigator will judge at the end of the study while evaluating, or during the study at each visit when the investigator checks the patient's diary. But the patient has to fill it regardless of whether it may or may not have connection with the study treatment. Similarly, any medicine that the patient take other than the study treatment during the study period, okay, that also the patient will have to mention, as long as that section is provided in the patient diary. So similarly, there are many sections provided in the patient diary based on study to study, which the patient has to fill during the study. Before the study begins, the patient, all the patients are trained, like they are given information on how to go about it, like what is supposed to be filled and all. Yeah, one thing I forgot about informed consent document is, I just said that if it is in English, then the patient will be able to understand. So all these clinical trials, they even translate the informed consent document. So you as a medical writer in future, you will write a document, informed consent document in English. Okay, it will get translated by specific translators. So there are these translating agencies who have done specialization in translating such documents. So they will translate it to multiple local languages where the study is going to be conducted. Okay. Then, okay. So importance of well-written clinical trial documents. Next point is prevents trial delays due to poor documentation. So, okay, yeah, this is one main thing. So what happens is, if there is, just like my first example, if there is a minor error in the protocol, which is not even error, but which has multiple interpretation of the same statement, or even if two interpretation of the same statement, then we may have to update the protocol based on the complexity of that statement, and we may have to create a new version. And based on what kind of an update it is, sometimes we even have to take approval from the regulatory authority again. Okay, so we will have to amend the protocol just for this minor mistake. Similarly, if we make a minor mistake in any other document, like informed consent document, anything, we will have to create another version of it, and the entire process, like submission, everything takes, like it takes a lot of time. Then our study gets delayed, and the product also gets delayed from coming into the market and helping people out to cure their diseases. So a well documented protocol reduces investigator errors. Just like I said, if it is clear, then there won't be any errors and there won't be any protocol deviations. Now, the next slide is on key regulatory guidelines. So these are, so if you'll see, there are underlines to FDA, EMA, CDSCO, ICH, GCP. Basically, these are all linked. So main guidelines are ICH, GCP. So if you go to ICH websites, there are multiple guidelines available. So ICH efficacy guidelines is what you should focus on for clinical trials. For as a writer, ICH E3 is the guideline to write clinical study report. Okay, so that has exact template of what is required, what is mandatory in a clinical study report. So it has a TOC and you will get exact idea of what you're supposed to write. So even though it is a difficult task to write clinical trial document, but it is not difficult to learn, as long as you are interested in learning and you are ready to spend some time in upskilling yourself. Then FDA. So FDA regulates clinical trials in the United States. Okay, so IND and NDA submissions happen in United States. So here I'll give you a brief about IND and NDA. So IND, investigational new drug application, is submitted before the clinical trial begins. It is basically protocol required to obtain regulatory approval to test a new drug in humans, includes preclinical study data. So in IND, when it is a new drug, like which is not there in the market at all, and a new molecule, okay, so they have to submit preclinical study data to prove that it is safe in animals and it has shown effectiveness, and it has to provide manufacturing details and the proposed clinical trial protocol. All the details they have to submit in IND, okay, investigational new drug, and it has to ensure patient safety before human trials can start. Then NDA, new drug application, is submitted after the clinical trials are completed. So basically this is like a report in which we seek regulatory approval to market and sell the drug. Okay, so it includes full clinical trial data, safety and efficacy analysis, manufacturing details, and proposed labeling. So we also need to, after a trial is conducted, while submitting the clinical study report, we also have to provide a label, okay, prescribing information. Even in India, we have to submit a prescribing information with the efficacy and safety results in the information along with the drug data. Then EMA is for EU, and CDSCO, DCGI, it is for in India. Okay. In India, we follow NDCT rules, New Drugs and Clinical Trial Rules 2019. So that PDF also I'll take you through it. Then types of clinical trial documents. So a lot of it I've spoken about before only in the previous slides. So some of it I'll speak about now. So you can segregate it as pre-trial documents, during trial documents, and post-trial documents. So in pre-trial documents, basically before the start of the clinical trial, I've segregated as preclinical trial documents. Okay. So study protocol, clinical trial synopsis, investigator's brochure, and informed consent document. So even though I've written study protocol first, let me tell you clinical trial synopsis, what it is. Okay. So if you open any protocol, it will have a synopsis section in the beginning. Synopsis is nothing but a synopsis, the word's definition itself. Okay. It is a mini version of the protocol. So in that you have summarized the protocol, all the important aspects. So that synopsis. So what we do while writing a protocol is first you have to create a synopsis and then you can expand it in protocol format. So in synopsis, you'll cover all the scientific information like inclusion and exclusion criteria, primary and secondary endpoints, title, duration, all this basic requirement, discontinuation criteria, and all of that. And then in protocol you have to add introduction, rationale about the drugs and all of that, and you have to elaborate in the method section like how exactly are you going to conduct the study. Okay. And in protocol you also have to add SOA, which is schedule of assessment. A lot of people call it by different names like calendar, study calendar, and all of that. It all means the same. So SOA, what is it about? Okay. So even though I will be speaking a lot about all these documents today, we will be going through each one of them later so that you don't forget it. Today I'm just giving a brief about each document. So SOA is basically a table in which you will mention the leftmost column will be the names of the tests, and then column headers will be the visit. Okay, suppose three visits are there during the study. So visit 1, 2, 3. And then under each visit, you will mention if this test is conducted, not conducted, like that. So it gives a clear idea to the investigator which all tests are supposed to be conducted at each visit. Right. Otherwise, again, like I said, like there are multiple sites and we say that this is a diabetes study. Primary endpoint is HbA1c assessment. Secondary endpoint is FBG, that is fasting blood glucose, postprandial blood glucose, and secondary endpoint is also safety assessment, that is adverse event assessment. Now with this, what does a person understand? Like, okay, HbA1c, fasting blood glucose, postprandial blood glucose, and AE we have to evaluate. These are the four things we have to evaluate. Okay. Now what about other things? So when we include a patient in a study, we need to evaluate based on inclusion and exclusion criteria. If a heart patient is included in the study, so we need to evaluate the baseline ECG values, right? Because our drug should not have any side effect, or if our drug has is prohibited in patients with kidney severe renal impairment or severe hepatic impairment, then we need to evaluate various parameters like EGFR at baseline, liver function tests at baseline, and see if the patient has severe, mild, moderate, or no issues in these organs. Okay. And based on that only, so that is why we need to have the calendar, study calendar, where we define what all tests are to be done at what all visit. Other than this, one important thing which is repeated in most of the studies is pregnancy tests for women. So most of the studies do not include pregnant women or lactating mothers. So at baseline we conduct UPT because there is a possibility that the lady may not be aware that she is pregnant. Okay. So then we need to ensure that the lady is not pregnant. So such tests are also required. Then serology tests like HIV, HBV, these tests. So many studies try try to exclude these patients because they have immunity issues. So all these things are there. So then these tests are also required. So like I said, primary endpoint and secondary endpoint had only what? HbA1c, fasting blood glucose, and postprandial blood glucose. But when we discussed about the number of tests to be done, it went on increasing and increasing continuously. Okay. So if we don't give a study calendar, each site will do it based on their opinion, investigator's opinion, and there will be a variation, right? And we don't want variation within the same study, because in the end of the study we have to compile data of all these patients and then take mean, evaluate all these things. Analysis is for analysis, patient data from each and every patient is required unless and until they were discontinued, lost to follow up, excluded from the study. Otherwise we need data for all these patients. We cannot say that this patient completed the study but we do not have this patient's ECG value at baseline, we do not have this patient's pregnancy test reports at baseline. So such things are not correct. Okay, these are all major protocol deviations. So that is why we need to have a study calendar to make the study uniform at all sites, and also to keep it safe for each and every patient who participates in the study. So in clinical trial synopsis, we mention all the scientific information. In study protocol, we elaborate all these data. Then in investigators brochure, okay, investigators brochure is basically, if it is for new drug, then we mention the preclinical study data, and if there is any clinical study data, then we add about that. Like we add all the possible safety data, like whatever side effect is possible, whatever side effect is seen, we add all the possible efficacy data, like whatever data is available till now, we try to provide it to the investigator. Okay, so that is why investigators brochure is important. Then informed consent document, as I told you in the previous slides, it it is to educate and obtain consents from each patient. So before we even start screening the patient, when the patient comes to the doctor and the patient has diabetes, and the patient got to know about this clinical trial, the patient approaches, or however, like in whatever manner the patient comes, before even conducting a physical examination or just a blood pressure for the clinical trial, blood pressure evaluation, we need to check, we need to get the informed consent signed from the patient. Okay, before getting the informed consent signed from the patient, we need to give the patient information sheet to the patient. So informed consent document is made of informed consent form and patient information sheet. Informed consent form is the form where the patient signs saying that I was informed about the study. I am completely aware about every aspect of the study, and a lot of points would be covered in that form, and the patient signs. Okay. In patient information sheet, we provide all the possible information about the study. That also has guidelines. Like in NDCT, it has a structure what all is supposed to be covered in informed consent form, patient information sheet. So we have to provide all those information. We cannot afford to miss even one of those parameters. And if the patient is unable to understand, the patient will be asking multiple questions to the doctor. Only after complete clarification of the study, if the patient agrees to participate, then only the patient has to sign the consent form. And after signing the consent form only, even a minor vital physical whatever screening test is there, whatever study assessment is there, can be initiated. Before that we cannot do anything, it is unethical. Okay, then comes the during trial document. So during trial documents are case report forms, patient diaries, and adverse event reports. Okay, so I'll tell you patient diaries I spoke about in the previous slide, but I will speak again. So patient diaries are basically, it is a diary, literally a diary given to the patient once the patient signs the informed consent form, as long as it is a part of the study. Not all studies have patient diary, some studies do not have patient diary, that's okay. But if it has, which most studies have, we have to give the patient diary to the patient. And this also becomes a part of study calendar, like dispensing of patient diary. So at visit 1 dispensing. Then collection of patient diary, if it is at last visit, then we have to mention, okay, we have collected the patient diary. So training for patient diary filling, so that is also a part of visit 1, like that. Okay. So in this, we will there will be various sections provided to record symptoms or side effects, and if the patient is taking medication, so every day after taking medication, or if it is morning, afternoon, evening, the patient has to mark, if that section is provided. So with this we can, so every visit, if the patient comes, the patient has to come with the medicine, suppose it is tablet, and the diary. So in the diary, if he has marked that in the last 1 week he had 14 doses, okay, which is and the treatment was twice daily dosing, so in 7 days he had 14 doses. In the diary he has marked, but when he gives the tablets back, the count does not match. So that is how the drug accountability is done. So then we have to ask the patient that you have not added like written properly in the diary. So such cross checking and all those things can be done, and safety of patient can be ensured if he had some medication which has drug interaction, and which was in the prohibited medication list in our study, but still he had it. So we need to check all those things. If he had some medication after which we have to discontinue that patient from the study, so that is where the patient diaries help. Okay. Then case report forms, these are filled by the study site person. So the study site person have this case report form for each visit, where they fill all the, so based on the SOA it is made, study schedule of assessment, and case report form will have all those things like ECG, whatever tests are supposed to be done, it will have those sections, and the values are supposed to be filled in by the site person. Okay. So the site person will conduct the assessments and will fill the data in the case report form, so that later in the end of the study we can evaluate, we can analyze, we can compile all the data for each patient and analyze. Case report forms are these days electronic, like online case report forms. It's not hard copies in most of the cases, but there are hard copies also. Then adverse event reports, these are to track safety issues. Okay. So here the adverse events data are collected. Then post trial documents. Post trial documents, once the trial is conducted, there's a term called database log. Okay. After the trial is done, everything is done, the database is logged. After that, the data is analyzed by the statistician, and tables, listings, and figures are provided. Okay. So listings is basically the individual patient data in Excel or in any form, but individual patient data. Tables are the statistical out, like after analyzing the data, suppose there were 1000 patients, so mean HbA1c or whatever, mean FBG, mean PPBG, all these things, mean value, mean tables are provided. Okay. So tables are provided, and figures based on what complicated figures were required. Okay. Like if suppose we wanted HbA1c bar graph, whatever type of figures we require, we can inform the statistician that I want this particular figure for this thing, and then they will provide. Then we have to compile the study report. In study report, we have to add the protocol data, which is the methods section. Introduction we have to write on our own. Method section will become in past tense, just like our manuscripts where we write methods in past tense. Then the result section we have to add from the table, and we have to write down the paragraphs, all of that. And there is a standard template for clinical study report also. As I said before, ICH E3 is the standard template. Okay. Then regulatory submission reports and safety reports are there. Post trials. Then role of clinical trial writer. So the key responsibilities is to draft and edit and review clinical trial documents. So drafting, editing your document, reviewing your co-writer's document, these things keep on going. So there's never one single writer involved in a clinical trial document, because these are all vast documents. After one person writes, there are a lot of people who have to review, which includes the co-writer also, co-author of the CSR. Okay. Then another responsibility is to ensure compliance with regulatory guidelines, work with principal investigators, doctors in the study, sponsors, and regulatory teams. Then translate complex scientific data into clear structured reports. then help avoid regulatory delays due to documentation errors. Then what skills are required to be a writer in clinical trial? Okay, so strong medical writing skills are required, then attention to detail and regulatory knowledge is required, and ability to simplify complex information. So when I say attention to detail, so I'll give you another example here. So what happens is, in many companies, in many instances, it may happen that the synopsis is written by a medical person, by a doctor within the team, medical team. So medical writer also belongs to the medical team in a lot of organizations. So if the synopsis is written by the doctor, a lot of people think that then what's so important in writing the protocol? You just have to elaborate it. It is not like that. Even no matter who writes the synopsis, when you are writing a particular document, when you are writing the protocol, you have to ensure that everything is correct. If you have any slightest idea about, oh, you think that okay, this may be incorrect, or you find a source that is contradictory to what is written from one particular source, then you have to highlight it. It is not just copy pasting the data. Okay, so all those things, attention to detail is very important. Then a lot of writers have this habit of using the previous protocol or previous study report as template. Okay, which is not correct. You should always create your template and use it, because what happens is you may miss out a word or two. Suppose the previous study was double blind study and the current study is open label study. The previous study was two arm study. Okay, the current study is single arm study. So double blind means both the doctor and the patient did not know what treatment was given to the patient, and open label is both of them know what treatment is been given. Okay, two arm is there were two treatments. Okay, one test, one comparator, and single arm is there's only one test arm, there's no comparator arm. So even though suppose you write the entire protocol correctly and you leave this other protocols one word in your document somewhere, then you will have to create another version just to correct that. So that is why you should be very careful. Attention to detail and a lot of review is required when you write clinical trial documents. A clinical trial writer bridges the gap between complex scientific data and clear regulatory communication. Okay. Then comes importance of documentation. The primary importance of these documentations is regulatory necessity. Okay, accurate documentation is important for regulatory approval. If you have not documented the data correctly, suppose for CSR, okay, so protocol has a approval step where the subject expert committee in India approve the protocol. After that only the study is initiated. So once we receive approval, that means the protocol was well written and it is clear and proper, and it has the ability to clearly convey what is supposed to be done to all the investigators, and it is safe for the patient. Okay, all those things are considered. Then after the study is done, uh, when you write the CSR, then you have to be very careful, because then if there is documentation error initially, also if there is documentation error, it is incorrect. But in the final CSR, there should be no chance of rejection of a document unless and until you make such errors like data and everything is here and there, you change the unit. Sometimes while copy pasting, what happens is milligram turn to microgram, and such ml turns to liter with some writers if they don't review. So all those things are there. So you have to be very clear, and you have to provide information is in the most accurate and clear manner. Okay, then best practices, clarity and consistency. You have to use clear language. You don't need to use, being a medical writer, a lot of people think that you have to use a lot of jargons and you have to show that you know it well, you have the best medical knowledge and all of that. It is not like that. You have to use simple scientific language, and you have to write it very clearly, maintain a consistent format, like one sentence active form, another sentence passive form, then jumping between suppose FBG and PPBG you want to present in the secondary endpoint results. Okay, so you'll write 2 sentences about fasting blood glucose, then 2 sentences about postprandial blood glucose, then you'll be back to fasting blood glucose. These are all very confusing. So you should write it in a clear, proper manner, like write about fasting blood glucose if it is the first secondary endpoint, and then you go to second secondary endpoint, which would be PPBG, and write that. So after fasting blood glucose data, you put your fasting blood glucose table. Then after PPBG data, you put your PPBG table. Okay. So that way things are very clear. Anybody who reads should like to read. No, anyway, these documents are so vast, 70, 80, sometimes 100, 150 pages. So if a person who's reading such complex documents, if the way of presentation is also not good, then who would like to read? No. So you need to be very clear, very good at your writing skills, so that the person would want to read it. Then thorough review process, as I said, in any kind of medical writing only there's a thorough review process, because it has to be there. But in clinical trial documents, the thoroughness, I would say, it is too high. It has to be there. Like, you cannot afford to make a mistake, because then either you have to spend a lot of time to redo it. That is also if you find it before the study is initiated, and after the study is initiated, then it becomes very complex. So you have to be very careful, thoroughly review. In case you feel that you're not sure about this particular thing, then you should ask your supervisor, your senior person, and all of them, and then proceed with it. In case you find an error also, I would personally suggest that as soon as you find an error, I know it is difficult to go and tell, okay, I made this error. I know it is very tough, but you should always, as soon as you find it, you should go and tell them that I'm so sorry, this error is gone in the file. Now what is to be done? Before somebody else finds your error, and if you have found it, you should highlight it. Okay. Then train authors regularly. So authors are basically writers. In CSR, we have authors. We write the list of people who are involved in the study. So medical writer's name also goes in the CSR. So there we the author, the writer of the CSR would be you, if you are writing the CSR. Okay. So continuous training is required, because these guidelines, all these things keep on updating with time. So we should be aware if a new update has come. We should not stay stuck to the previous template or the previous version of these guidelines. Common pitfalls. Okay. So inadequate detail. So sometimes it may happen that you don't provide sufficient details, even though I said that there should be no jargons, no uh, very high level vocabs and all. You should use clear scientific language and write the documents. It does not mean that you should not provide sufficient details. The data should be sufficient, the detail should be sufficient, and there should be no dual interpretation to any sentence. There should be only single interpretation to each of your sentences. Okay. So otherwise it will affect the study outcome, the study results. So to recap, clinical research is essential for medical advancements. Regulatory guidelines ensure patient safety, data integrity. So when it comes to patient safety, data integrity, I will also let you all know that even if somebody participates in a clinical trial, we ensure that the patient's name is not revealed, identity in any form is not revealed anywhere. Okay. So that is there. The patients are given numbers, patient numbers, and based on that only the study is conducted. Their names are not used anywhere. Their identity is not revealed to anyone. Then clinical trial documents plays a crucial role in clinical trial success. So even if the trial was planned in the mind, in the most correct manner, most appropriate manner, even if the drug is very effective and safe, in everything is positive about the study, but if the documents are not made properly, then there is going to be a huge issue. So clinical trial documents play a crucial role in clinical trial success. Then medical writers. So if the clinical trial documents are that important, that means medical writers are also equally important, because you are the one who's going to write the clinical trial documents and bridge the gap between science and regulations. Okay. And effective clinical trial writing accelerates drug approval process and improves patient outcome. So yeah, as I told you, if the writing is not clear, writing is not correct, if there are errors, then there are multiple amendments to a document, and then the process also gets delayed. So effective clinical trial writing helps in speeding up the drug approval process, because we don't have to spend so much time in submitting amendments and getting approval for the amendments. That is there. Thank you. I'll end the meeting.
Thank you.